Welcome to another edition of Airsoft Reports. Today we're going to take a look at the Echo 1 M14 SOCOM. Now, as usual, we want to see how fast the M14 fires, so we're going to put it on the chronograph and see what it can do. Now, as usual, we want to give you a good idea of the velocity, so we're going to fire off a 5-shot string and pull the averages from that. Now, those numbers give it an average of around 308 to 310 FPS, and that's in line with what we had tested before. This average, though, gives it probably one of the slowest velocities of any of the Echo 1s that we've tested so far. Now, you're looking at the newest offering from Echo 1. It's the M14 SOCOM. Now, we were really excited when Echo 1 announced that they were going to be making an M14 variant, as it's always been a real favorite of ours. We had high expectations of it from the beginning, and to a certain extent it's met those benchmarks that we set for it. But in some ways it has fallen a little short, and we'll get to that in more detail in the next segment. Now, we'll start our quality report by focusing on the finish of the gun. In general, we like what we see on the stock. It's actually of a very good quality. It has a sort of rubber feel almost to it. Very nice, it feels good, and it's pretty solid. What we don't like, however, is the handguard, or heat shield, whichever you prefer to call it. It's very, very cheap feeling. It feels really, it's like nothing Echo 1 has ever put out so far that I've seen. Lots of squeaks, lots of vibration. I mean, it is really the weakest point, I think, on the gun as far as a fit and finish perspective goes. But now let's take a look at the battery compartment. This is one tricky aspect of the gun, and you'll definitely want to see how it works. Now, one of the unique and somewhat tricky features about the M14 is how the battery goes in the stock. This is a metal butt plate, and you just pull up on it, and then it clicks in place. Then the smaller door opens, revealing the battery compartment. Now, it is a very tight compartment that, as far as we can tell, will really only accept the 8.4 volt battery that, or something similarly sized that came with it. There is a little trick to this. The connector and the fuse box are actually, there's a small little chamber basically within the stock that the fuse connector and its wiring fit into, leaving just the tip of the connector showing outside. And this is actually how you should put the battery in. Follow the instructions, it gives you a pretty good diagram of how it works. But just to show you, you want the tip of the connector that actually connects the motor itself on top of the battery. And the battery slides in all the way. Then you make the connection. Making the connection before is going to just cause you a world of trouble, and you can actually crimp and maybe even break the cable, so be careful. Then you just push the two connectors down, close the door, and the butt plate, it'll take a little bit of pressure, but it will eventually just snap closed. So watch your fingers, it comes down kind of fast. Alright, and that's how you get the battery into the compartment. Some people will be kind of disappointed because even though you do have a fairly large stock, the battery is probably not going to be very upgradable just because of the physical restrictions on the inside. Now let's take a look at the rest of the features on the gun. Now, one of the unique features on the M14 is its all-metal trigger guard assembly, which is fully removable. You'll notice right here again is the trigger guard, safety, and we've removed the magazine for the sake of this demonstration. Now, we find it easiest to turn the gun on its end. You're going to pull from the portion of the trigger guard which is closest to the stock. Just pull up on it, all the way up until you can't pivot the trigger guard anymore, and then you pull out. And it's a fairly simple procedure. If you were actually disassembling the gun, this would be one of the first things that you do. Putting it back in is almost as simple as just simply reversing what you've just done. Make sure it's fully seated. Helps if the safety is in the armed position. Then you push the trigger guard all the way down until you hear it click, and you're back in business. Now another unique feature about the M14 is the placement of its hop-up adjustment knob. It's basically inside the magazine well, as you can see here. Now you can adjust it while the magazine is in, and it's actually one of the better hop-up adjustment knobs that we've encountered. With each turn, you'll hear ever so slight a click. And it really does allow for fine-tuned adjustment of the hop-up. And while we've got it on its end, we'll show you how the magazine fits in here. We found that we can really fit about 330 or so BBs into what they're calling the high-capacity magazine. It's done in a fairly straightforward manner. Make sure that the nub that catches the front of the magazine is inserted properly, otherwise you'll have BBs everywhere. Taking the magazine out is a fairly simple affair. You push forward on the metal magazine release lever and it shoehorns out. The magazine itself is made of metal and it has a good finish. There is a little bit of slop though, left and right. Not a fan of that, but probably can't be helped given how shallow the magazine well itself is. Now the M14 departs from the norm once again in the way it has its fire selector and safety combination set up. They are both separate from each other. So you've got the fire selector switch here and you have the safety right basically in the trigger guard. We actually like this setup and the safety works very well. When the airsoft gun is ready to fire, you'll see that the safety is basically free of the trigger guard. However, in safe mode, it actually obstructs part of the trigger guard and gives you a good tactile message basically that it's unsafe. Obviously, if your finger can't go through, you know it's unsafe. And disengaging it is also simple. Good to have, especially when you're, when you're in the middle of a firefight. You just push it forward, it clicks, a very nice positive click. Very easy to use, we like that. Now the fire selector switch, also very unique, but it works well. You see how it has a small notch or prong at the top. And when it is facing upwards, it's in semi mode. You're going to turn the knob a full 180 degrees to put it in fully automatic, and it has a little click at the bottom. First couple of times it might seem stiff, but that is in fact the proper operation. To turn it back, you just repeat the process, click it back, and now you're back in semi mode. A little bit different, but it works well, and it's fairly foolproof, so we like that.